just bear with us for one moment. We'll be starting just in a moment. Thanks. So as we wait, I suppose I can introduce our panel. First of all, thank you all for coming. This is the International Election Observation Mission to the Kyrgyz Republic's presidential election press conference. My name is Nat Perry. I'm head of communications at the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and we have here a panel of heads of missions from the International Election Observation Mission. We'll start with remarks from the special coordinator, Mr. Azai Guliev, he's led about 400 short-term observers to this mission, and he will present the statement of preliminary findings and conclusions, and then we'll hear remarks from each of the panelists who will offer comments on various aspects of the election, and then we'll have time for questions, but we're just waiting on one more thing, so if you could just bear with us one moment. Thank you. I think we're set to begin now, so I will hand the floor to Mr. Azai Guliev, who is a Vice President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and a Member of Parliament from Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Nat. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is our pleasure and honor to welcome all of you. First of all, I'd like to thank to all the representatives of mass media for showing interest. And as Nat introduced me, my name is Azai Guliev. I am a member of Azerbaijan Parliament and Vice President of the OECPA and the Special Coordinator of the OEC Observation Mission, as well as the OEC Short-Term Observation Mission Leader. As special coordinator, as it already mentioned here, I led almost 400 short-term observers who deployed around the country, including strong delegation from the OEC Audit Office and the OECE Parliamentary Assembly and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and European Parliament. Together, we have agreed on the following statement of preliminary findings and conclusions on the presidential election which took place yesterday here in Kyrgyzstan. The 15th October presidential election in the Kyrgyz Republic contributed to the strengthening of democratic institutions by providing for an orderly transfer of power from one elected president to another. The election was competitive as voters had a wide choice and candidates could in general campaign freely, although cases of misuse of public resources, pressure on voters, and vote buying remain a concern. The technical aspects of the election were well administered, but the adjudication of election disputes by the Central Commission for Elections and Referenda was at times biased. While televised debates contributed to greater pluralism, self-censorship and limited editorial coverage of the campaign signaled deficiencies in media freedom. Voting was orderly and well organized in large majority of polling stations observed. Despite problems with ballot secrecy, numerous and significant procedural problems were noted during the vote count and the initial stages of tabulation. The legal framework, which underwent numerous amendments in 2017, in general adequately regulates many technical aspects of electoral process. However, some aspects of legal provisions, including campaigning and campaign financing, citizen observation, and complaints, are not comprehensive and lack clarity. The election was technically well organized by the election administration bodies, but there was concern over the neutrality of the CEC. In general, CEC members worked professionally, but in some cases favored certain candidates, which resulted in disagreements during decision-making on important issues and negatively affected the CEC impartiality. The voter register is based on the centralized population register and contains biometric data of all voters. While the voter registration and verification system enjoys general confidence, a significant number of Kyrgyzstani citizens, mainly those residing abroad, didn't undergo biometric registration. 11 presidential candidates stood for election, giving voters a wide choice. Nevertheless, a burdensome nomination process challenged the inclusiveness of the registration process. The registered candidates could generally campaign freely, but there were several accusations of misconduct. There were also several ongoing criminal cases against opposition politicians or others supporting one of the main candidates. Recent legal amendments significantly increased the limits for contribution to candidates' campaigns and removed the spending limit. These raise concerns over equality for candidates. The law doesn't require disclosure of sources of campaign funding and doesn't provide proportionate sanctions for violations of campaign finance rules. The Constitution guarantees freedom of expression and explicitly prohibits criminal prosecution for defamation. However, defamation claims had an adverse effect on public debate and resulted in cases of self-censorship. Most complaints received by the CEC before election day concerned violations of campaign rules. The CEC maintained an online registry of complaints which enhanced transparency. But while the CEC considered most complaints, it didn't always use sanctions available or provide effective remedies. National minorities were involved in the election campaign, and although candidates competed for the minority vote, contested platforms didn't specifically address the situation of national minorities or their integration into society. While we didn't observe an anti-minority rhetoric during the campaign, inter-ethnic issues were at times utilized for political ends. Civil society played an important role in civic and voter education and also undertook comprehensive election observation. This contributed to increasing the transparency of election process at all. Election day was peaceful and transparent, and voter turnout, as announced by the CEC, was 56%. There were some challenges, but in general, election day proceeded calmly and without any major incident. I hope Ambassador Kyrgyzstan will provide us more details. Taking this opportunity, I thank our partners from the OECPA, Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and European Parliament, and of course, ODIHR, for working fruitfully and expressing our opinion in the one's voice. To conclude my remarks, on behalf of the International Election Observation Mission, I would like to thank the Kyrgyz authorities for inviting us to monitor this presidential election. I also congratulate the people of Kyrgyzstan for well-run and competitive election and wish all the best, success, peace, and prosperity. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Guliev. I now hand the floor to Ms. Doris Fiala, a member of parliament from Switzerland and the head of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe's delegation. Ms. Fiala, the floor is yours.
Yes, dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to mention that I share the conclusions of the International Election Observation Mission presented by my colleague, Mr. Guliev, Special Coordinator of the OSCE Short-Term Observers. The Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly delegation observed the presidential election in Kyrgyzstan yesterday. Our delegation is composed of 16 members of the Assembly, representing all political groups of the Assembly and 13 Council of Europe member states. The delegation is accompanied by the legal experts of the Council of Europe Venice Commission. We were invited by the authorities of the country to observe the presidential election because Kyrgyzstan has the status of partner for democracy with the Parliamentary Assembly and has the commitment to invite our Assembly to observe elections. Therefore, I would like to thank the authorities of the country for having invited us, our organization, to observe the election and also for their spirit of cooperation. Yesterday, for polling, we sent 11 teams of observers to Bishkek and surrounding areas, as well as in the regions. Our observers noted that voting was transparent and that Kyrgyz citizens could make their choice freely from among 11 presidential candidates. This is a clear sign, ladies and gentlemen, of the growing political maturity of Kyrgyz society. You know that elections are not just limited to election day. It is a process including the election campaign. During the election campaign, we were informed by different interlocutors about cases of restrictions on freedom of expression, allegations of misuse of administrative resources, and the lack of a level playing field in terms of financing. So, as there is still room for improvement of the electoral legal framework and electoral practices, I invite Kyrgyz authorities to continue their close cooperation with the Parliamentarian Assembly and the Council of Europe's Venice Commission. I will present my report on the observation of this presidential election on 24th November in Copenhagen. Finally, I would like to mention the excellent work done by thousands of polling station commission members, the vast majority women, who in this way demonstrated their commitment to democracy. However, if I may add this, I very much regret the fact where political power is concerned, Kyrgyzstan had only one female candidate out of 11. With a wink, ladies and gentlemen, I would say that, that human beings walk better on two legs. This is also true for equal participation in political life and political power, as well as for the good functioning of our societies. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you indeed, Ms. Fiala. I now pass the floor to Artur Gerasimov, a member of the Ukrainian Parliament who led the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's delegation of observers.
Thank you. As a member of Ukrainian Parliament and the head of the OSCE delegation of observers, which consists of 37 members from 20 countries around the world, I want to say that, first of all, this election was an important benchmark for the Kyrgyz Republic, because I want to support Azai Guliyev's opinion that it provides real grounds for an orderly transfer from one elected president to another. Most technical aspects of the election were well organized, and the election administration bodies mostly work professionally, especially in Bishkek. We observed how well all the vote identification, biometric recognition, and ballot scanning procedures were used. It should be noted that since 2015, when the system was first introduced, it has been improved. For example, special devices for passport scanning and facial recognition technologies were added, and we observed it during our visits to the polling stations. However, a significant number of Kyrgyzstani citizens were not included into the voter register because they had not undergone biometric registration, and they were therefore not able to exercise their right to vote. This is still a problem, and Kyrgyzstani authorities need to continue improving this situation. Access for persons with disabilities is another area that would benefit from improvement. The CEC has made efforts to facilitate voting rights of persons with disabilities, but many of our observers noted that a significant number of polling stations were not prepared to allow disabled voters to cast a ballot. We welcome that efforts are ongoing for the next electoral cycle to improve this situation. There were also concerns raised about the secrecy of the vote, and I would urge Kyrgyzstan to work on this issue as well. I personally also witnessed a number of police officers inside polling stations, which is something that raises eyebrows for international observers. Even if police officers are only there to keep order, their presence could be seen as intimidating by some. We should be clear that only authorized persons, including poll workers, voters, and observers, should be permitted inside polling stations. Although the election was not without its flaws, I hope that the positive developments we have seen will serve as a basis for a consolidation of democracy in this country and in the region. In a personal regard, I thank you very much to the Kyrgyz Republic for your hospitality. I look forward to returning to this hospitable country next year for the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly 2018 autumn meeting. The active engagement of Kyrgyzstan in our assembly is very much appreciated, and we all look forward to strengthening our cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerasimov. We'll now hear from Laima Andrikina, head of the European Parliament's delegation.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I am Laima Andrikina, Chair of the European Parliament Election Observation Delegation, and also first Vice President of our Standing Delegation for Relations with Central Asia. It is my pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to you today. The European Parliament, the only directly elected body of the European Union, represents 500 million European citizens and is committed to strengthen democracy all over the world. Election observation is one of our key foreign policy instruments in this process. On election day, we observed voting in various polling stations across the country. from opening to the closing activities, as well as the vote count. Our 11 observers were divided into 3 teams, deployed in Bishkek, Balikchi, and Karabalta, visiting both urban and rural areas. I would like to make some specific remarks. As a delegation, we were integrated within the framework of an international election observation mission. I would like to thank my colleagues from the OSCE ODIHR, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and the Venice Commission for our excellent cooperation during the mission. The European Parliament delegation fully supports and endorses the preliminary findings and conclusions of the observer mission. The European Parliament has been observing elections in your country since 2005. This is a clear sign that we think Kyrgyzstan provides a unique example in the region and that its democratic course should be encouraged. I would therefore like to focus on a number of issues that arose in the campaign and on election day. We were concerned at the reports of undue restrictions being placed on media freedom, in particular the defamation claims against journalists, which adversely affected public debate and resulted in self-censorship. Although the TV debates between candidates contributed to greater pluralism, television overall did not provide sufficient and unbiased news coverage of the campaign. We welcome the important role played by the civil society in civic and voter education, which increased the transparency of the electoral process. However, we also heard reports of increasing pressure being placed on civil society. Speaking for the European Parliament, we are deeply concerned about several recent criminal cases and imprisonment of members of the opposition. Turning to EU-Kyrgyzstan relations, I would like to stress that these elements are part of our regular dialogue with Kyrgyzstan, including under the EU Special Incentive for Sustainable Development and Good Governance, GSP+. We first welcome the adoption of mandate enabling the EU to enter into negotiations leading to a new comprehensive agreement with Kyrgyzstan. Our partnership must be based on a commitment to undertake reforms, strengthening democracy, fundamental freedoms, the rule of law, and independence of the judiciary. Progress on such issues will therefore be needed in order for the European Parliament to ratify the future agreement. In this context, we look forward to the final OSCE ODIHR report and the recommendations it will contain. The European Parliament attaches great significance to them and will pay full attention to their implementation. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much indeed. And last but not least, we will hear from Ambassador Alexandra Kilchevsky, head of the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights Long-Term Observation Mission. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, being the last speaker, one of my concerns is, of course, not to repeat what has been said by previous speakers, but if it is the case, you understand that it's only a sign that we speak with one voice. This being said, you know that this is our OSCE ODIHR 11th such election observation mission in the Kyrgyz Republic. We are here upon an invitation by the Kyrgyz government. Our mission has been here already for 6 weeks. It consists of 17 core team members and 26 long-term observers, drawn in total from 23 OSCE participating states, the long-term observers being based in the 7 oblasts or regions of this country and here in Bishkek. Yesterday, we deployed 369 observers from representing 43 countries, including 298 long-term and short-term observers deployed by us by the OEC, ODIHR, and, as it was said, a 37-member delegation from the OEC Parliamentary Assembly, a 23-member delegation from the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, and 11-member delegation from the European Parliament. According to our methodology, specific methodology, we observed the various stages of the election process yesterday. Opening was observed in 112 polling stations, and voting was observed in 1,203 polling stations across the country. I will not go into details, but the main features I would like to inform you about. Regarding the opening, generally speaking, we very often observed the presence of unauthorized people, including so-called volunteers, družinniki, which also including also police, who were present at all stages of election day, and at times interfering in the work of the commissions. Some cases also of vote buying and controlling voters' access were observed by our mission. Regarding opening procedures was negatively assessed in, I would say, only 11 of the 112 polling stations observed, again largely due to the presence of unauthorized people. Regarding the voting process, I just said that it was observed in 1,203 polling stations. The voting process was assessed positively in 94% of the polling stations observed. Now, what we very often observed is problems caused by the secrecy of the vote. It is a real particular matter of concern. Our mission observed and reported from 60% of polling stations observed, but not all voters marked their ballots in secrecy, and this is largely due to the design and positioning of the booths. Further, in 5% of the polling stations observed, non-PEC members sometimes directed or interfered in the work of the PEC. Coming now to the vote count was assessed negatively in more than 1/3 of polling stations where it was observed. In numbers, it is 46 out of 138. Finally, regarding the tabulation process, the initial stages of this process were assessed negatively in 22 of the 50 territorial election commissions where it was observed by our mission. You obviously will find more details in our preliminary statement of findings and conclusions. Now, coming back to the core of our observation of our mission, you know that according to OEC, with their document, procedures and methodology, our mandate is to assess this election for its compliance with international principles for democratic elections, OEC commitments, meaning commitments agreed by all participating states, including Kyrgyzstan, as well as with national legislation. This is to say, and would like to underline, This is to say that we observe this election as such and do not compare them with previous elections in the country or in any other country. Our role is to provide and to observe and to provide factual reporting on these findings. It is not to interfere in the process. We are not interested in the election result. We are interested to see how elections are conducted with respect, again, to democratic principles. Again, in line with one of our basic principles, I mean, a principle agreed by all OECD participating states, an election process, and it has already been said, an election process is more than one-day event, and obviously our mandate is to observe the various elements ensuring that the electoral process takes place in an environment where fundamental freedoms are respected and political pluralism exists so that voters, quote, so that voters are able to cast their ballots free from intimidation, free from violence of administrative interference. In this respect, I would like to draw your attention to the following. It has already been said, but I will repeat it. Our mission received credible reports about misuse of public resources and pressure on voters, as well as allegation of vote buying. You know that you yourself in the media you reported several such cases. Recently, close to the day, we observed several cases of open and official interference in the election campaign from the State Committee of National Security and other official institutions and other officials as well. As it has been said before, disagreement preceding the decision-making on important issues were indicative of CEC members favoring certain candidates, thus demonstrating the CEC's lack of impartiality. Further, all the voters were offered the wide choice of candidates, as you know. The inclusiveness of the registration process was challenged by burdensome regulations and their implementation. A number of OECD interlocutors and international institutions, organizations, or reports raised concern about the lack of independence of the judiciary. Regarding the press, as it has already been said, defamation claims against media outlets and journalists by the incumbent president and by candidates resulted in self-censorship among journalists and a limited coverage of the election process. In this respect, television, I would say including the public service, or I would say especially the public service broadcasters, failed to provide sufficient and unbiased news coverage of the campaign. This being said, and I would like you to refer for more details to the document we'll release just after this press conference. We are conscious that this country, the Kyrgyz Republic, has a special profile in the region. We know that Kyrgyzstan is the only Central Asian country that has changed or renewed several times its political leadership and experienced this peaceful transfer of power since its independence in 1991. The outgoing president will leave his office after the expiry of his 6-year mandate on 1st December, and this is in line with a constitution under which the incumbent president cannot stand for re-election. And as far as the present presidential elections are concerned, this is the 6th such one since Kyrgyzstan became independent. As a result, 4 different presidents held this position so far, one of them, no, two of them, sorry, having been re-elected for the second term. Now, what we'll be doing in the future will remain in the country until the end of the election process. And in 2 months' time, we'll release a final report. This final report will include our main conclusions, findings, but it will also, and mainly I would say, include a list of recommendations. Some of them we'll consider them as priority recommendations, some others important ones, but maybe to a lesser extent. And according again to OEC previous documents, all our OEC participating states committed themselves to follow up on OEC OD recommendation. So it will be then up to the country, to its civil society, to its political leadership and institution to decide how to use our findings and especially our recommendations. So in this respect, I would like to express once again, I would say repeatedly, the OEC OD readiness to provide its assistance to the given country, to the Kyrgyz Republic, in order for it to improve the electoral process and, I would say, its democratic record. Indeed, we should be conscious and bear in mind that an election is mainly a test of one's country democratic record. It's more than what happens on a day. Of course, one may introduce sophisticated equipment in polling stations, but at the end of the day, it's the voter who will vote, not the machine. Therefore, as long as voters, or citizens, do not fully enjoy fundamental freedoms and are not free to cast their votes without intimidation or fear of intimidation or pressure from law enforcement agencies, state officials, and other institutions, there is room, I would say, there is room for progress.
Thank you, Ambassador.
One should also understand, sorry.
So we might have to wrap it up for questions at this point.
My last sentence. One should also bear in mind that holding, or rather striving to hold as free and fair as possible elections ensures for the given country more stability, more justice, and therefore more prosperity. And this is what I would very much like to wish to this very country, to the Kyrgyz Republic, its citizens, and its civil society. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. We now have time for 1 or 2 questions. Please rise. I believe we have some microphones that we can use. Please identify yourself and identify the media outlet you represent and to whom your question is being directed. Thank you.
Толкун Наматбаева, агентство «Франс Пресс». Скажите, пожалуйста, кто перепроверит автоматический подсчет голосов и насколько вы уверены, что при подсчете не было нарушений? Спасибо.
Sounds like it might be a good one for Ambassador Kelcheski.
Well, I must admit that I'm not quite sure that we'll be able to assess the process. You know that many of the, I mean, we observed that many territorial election commissions directly sent the figures coming from the computers, whereas by law they should compare it with the ballots. And you should know that the Central Election Commission has a 20-day period before releasing the official results of the election. So it should be done in the forthcoming days, in this period of time. And as I said, it will remain until the end of the election process, and we'll observe also this element of the process.
Thank you. Another question? I see this gentleman. Maybe, yeah.
Hi, Peter Leonard, Eurasianet. So I have a question about the assessment of the vote count and the tabulation. This is again for Ambassador Kalchevsky. I was wondering if you could just explain in layman's terms what exactly you mean by shortcomings in tabulation and shortcomings in the vote count process, and if you could illustrate with any particular examples of the kinds of things that you've seen in this particular election that might help us understand what exactly that means, because these terms are a little bit vague for some people.
But I see that I'm invited to be brief. As you can imagine, there are several, of course, reasons for our assessment and negative assessment. One of the reasons is that many PACs fail to perform basic reconciliation procedures, such as cancelling unused ballots. This was very often observed, counting the number of signatures on the voter list, or producing an act on the number of ballots issued to voters. In some cases, the PAC did not announce the preliminary result provided by the ballot scanner, etc., etc. You'll see the details contained in on our report. There are many reasons because it is rather complicated procedures. But what puzzled us is that we were told that most of the members of the election commissions were supposed to be well trained because they have been selected already 2 years ago, so they should have been well trained. But in many instances, we noted that we are not either not enough trained or whatever. But so it was sometimes we met very not experienced or not at the level requested professional skills.